Adapted for Jonathan Roumie. When Jonathan Roumie walked into the Fox News studio shortly after the passing of Pope Francis, the audience expected a lighthearted segment with the actor known for portraying Jesus in The Chosen. But the atmosphere shifted almost immediately. Host Sean Hannity tried to keep things casual, but Jonathan wasn't playing along. He was silent, his eyes fixed on an old envelope resting on the table beside a glass of water. It was sealed with deep red Vatican wax. That single image changed everything. What began as a routine celebrity interview turned into something unexpected. A live revelation, an untold secret, and a truth long buried. Before we dive into what happened, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. Under the bright studio lights, a wave of applause greeted Jonathan. The energy was electric. People expected a spiritual yet easygoing conversation, maybe about his recent projects. But there it was, the envelope, silent and solemn, waiting to be acknowledged. Jonathan entered with a warm smile, but his eyes gave something away. They darted briefly toward the envelope. He sat down, his fingers subtly clenching. Hannity, always the polished host, opened confidently. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we have a very special guest, actor and storyteller Jonathan Roumie. Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Jonathan gave a gentle nod. Thank you, Sean. Hannity leaned in, upbeat. You've stirred hearts around the world, from The Chosen to your spiritual outreach. But tonight, what should we expect? Another faith story? Maybe a new project? The audience chuckled softly, but Jonathan didn't smile. He inhaled deeply and interrupted. I'm not here to talk about acting, Sean. I'm here because of a promise I made to Pope Francis. The studio fell into a sudden hush. Hannity raised an eyebrow. A promise to Pope Francis? He asked, his tone shifting. That's unexpected. What sort of promise? Jonathan's voice trembled slightly, but his gaze was unwavering. He entrusted me with something he believed the world needed to hear. And tonight, I'm breaking the silence. Phones quietly lifted. The envelope on the table, once a mysterious detail, now held the weight of anticipation. Jonathan sat still, his eyes locked on it, as if it whispered to him, reminding him of something sacred. Sensing the moment, Hannity lowered his voice. You mentioned a promise. That's a big claim, Jonathan. What happened between you and the Pope? Jonathan took a long breath, as if unlocking a sealed memory. It wasn't long ago, he began slowly. I was in Rome, not for a film shoot or a festival. I was invited for a private screening of The Chosen at the Vatican. I thought it was just a kind gesture, nothing more. He paused. But then a priest knocked on my hotel door one evening. He didn't say much, just handed me a letter, handwritten, slanted black ink. It read, I wish to meet you, just the two of us. Come to Casa Santa Marta. Midnight. Francis, as the audience murmured. Hannity leaned forward, eyes narrowing with intrigue. A personal invitation from the Pope himself. How did you feel? Jonathan gave a faint smile tinged with disbelief. I thought it was a prank. I'm just an actor from New York who plays Jesus on screen. I don't belong in the inner circles of the Vatican. But something about the letter, its simplicity, its urgency, pulled at me. He shifted in his seat, visibly emotional. At midnight, a plain black car picked me up. No security, no fanfare. We moved through Rome's old streets until we reached a side gate. No cameras, no tourists. A silent priest led me through long, cold corridors. Candlelight flickered against stone walls. And then I entered a small room. Jonathan's voice softened. There he was, sitting on a wooden chair, dressed in simple white. Not the grandeur I expected. He looked tired, not weak, but burdened, as if the weight of eternity had rested on his shoulders. The audience leaned in. He stood, smiled gently, took my hand. Thank you for coming, Jonathan, he said. I've watched your work. I heard the way you speak about faith. It didn't sound like performance. It sounded like truth. Jonathan paused, swallowing back emotion. He spoke not of doctrine or politics, but of sorrow. He told me, being Pope is not glory, it's a burden. I pray, and often I hear nothing, not from God, but from those I trusted most. Hannity's voice dropped. You mean he felt alone? Jonathan nodded slowly. More than alone, betrayed. He said the church had shadows, people who claimed holiness, but pursued power. He said every step toward reform felt like walking a glass bridge. Jonathan reached out, his hand resting gently on the envelope. He gave me this, sealed in red wax. He said, don't open it now, only when I'm gone. You'll know when the time comes. Hannity blinked, stunned. Jonathan continued, his voice deep and calm. I wanted to ask more, but he only smiled, placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, faith isn't about answers. It's about having the courage to ask the right questions. Jonathan sat quietly in the studio, eyes still locked on the Vatican envelope, its crimson wax catching the light like an unspoken vow. He leaned forward slightly, voice low and steady. I left Casa Santa Marta that night in a daze. Back at the hotel, I placed the envelope in my bag. It felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Not in weight, but in meaning. He paused, glancing toward the audience. I didn't know what Pope Francis saw in me. I'm not a theologian, not a priest, just an actor who stumbled into faith. But something in his gaze, something told me I couldn't walk away. Sean Hannity leaned in, his voice softened by curiosity. Did you open it right away? After you left him? Jonathan shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving the table. No, I promised I wouldn't, and I kept that promise, even when it kept me up at night. He looked up now into the camera. The studio was utterly still. But when I heard he had passed, something shifted inside me. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I knew this moment would come. The envelope rested between them like a living presence. Hannity, sensing the gravity of the situation, leaned forward. Jonathan, you've told us about a secret meeting, about the letter, about the Pope choosing you. But what happened after that? What brought you here tonight, to break the silence now, on live television? Jonathan scanned the crowd for a long moment, then began quietly. After I returned to the States, I told myself life would go back to normal. I'd go back to acting, speaking, showing up for people's lives in small ways. But the envelope was always there, and then the signs started. He exhaled slowly, his voice tighter now. 1 week later, I found a note in my bag, blue ink, written by hand. It read, "Keep the envelope secret. Words kill faster than knives." A murmur moved through the studio. At first, I thought it was some twisted joke, but more notes followed. One slipped under my door at a hotel in DC. Another came in the mail. No return address. All saying the same thing. Stay silent or pay the price. Jonathan's voice faltered for a moment. The mask of the actor faded, and the weight of a man haunted by truth emerged. I started noticing strange things. A black car idling too long outside the studio. My phone ringing, no voice, just breathing. I told myself it was stress, paranoia maybe, but deep down I knew someone was watching. Hannity cut in, concerned. Did you report it? To the police, to anyone? Jonathan offered a thin smile, one not of comfort, but of experience. I wanted to, I really did. But part of me feared that no one would believe me. Worse, that they'd think I was losing my mind. And if anyone came for the envelope, he paused, then added quietly, I hid it in a safe at home. But every night it felt like it was ticking, like a bum I didn't understand. The studio remained transfixed. Then I had a dream, unlike any I'd ever had. He shifted in his seat, his tone almost reverent. I saw myself in a vast marble hall. There were no people, no chairs, only silence. At the far end, Pope Francis stood, but he looked different. He wore a simple gray cloak, like a pilgrim. Not the Pope, just a man. Jonathan looked off into the distance, reliving the vision. He walked toward me. I felt warmth from him, but also something heavy, sorrow maybe. And then he said, Jonathan, you carry the voice the world needs, but you must choose. Keep yourself safe, or let the truth guide you. Jonathan's voice trembled ever so slightly. He reminded me of something I hadn't thought of in years. I was a child, maybe 7. My grandmother took me to a church back home in New York. My parents were struggling. I remember kneeling before a statue of Mary. I didn't know what to pray for, but I felt peace. He swallowed hard. In the dream, he said, you prayed for light as a child. Now you must carry it, even if darkness follows. The studio was frozen. Hannity asked gently, do you believe it was really him, or just a dream? Jonathan looked up. I don't know, but when I woke up, I was drenched in sweat. I felt watched, not in fear, in calling. He leaned forward. That's when I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. The envelope wasn't just a letter, it was a responsibility. He recounted the weeks that followed. Things kept escalating. My team noticed I was distant. A journalist hinted they had heard whispers, rumors of a secret message from the Vatican in my possession. I felt like I was living inside a puzzle whose edges I couldn't see. Then he looked directly at Hannity. But the dream wasn't what made me come tonight. It was the day I saw his funeral on TV, the world mourning. And I felt hollow, like I'd failed him. If I stayed silent, I'd betray not just his trust, but myself. Jonathan gently touched the red seal with his fingertips. I brought this envelope tonight because silence was no longer an option. He didn't choose me because I'm brave or brilliant. He chose me because he believed I would speak when the moment came. Hannity nodded, hushed. And that moment is now? Jonathan met his gaze. Yes, but before I open it, I want everyone watching to understand. This isn't just about the Pope. It's about all of us. The audience leaned in, breath held. Hannity's voice softened. You've spoken of threats, a dream, a sacred mission. Why now? Why here? Jonathan looked back down at the envelope, his thumb brushing the seal. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 tiny moments, building, pressing, until I knew I had to speak. He leaned back slightly. When I saw the funeral, I locked myself in my study. I stared at the envelope. I felt fear, not just for myself, but for what it might contain. Would it unravel lives? Would it paint targets on my back? He paused. Then the threats came again. One in my briefcase, another under my car's windshield. Each note colder than the last. Stay silent. Lose everything. I stopped trusting people, even my closest friends. He looked up. But you know what really made me decide? A long silence. My son. The audience visibly reacted. Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. I held him in my arms, and I thought, what kind of world am I building for him if I stay quiet out of fear? He placed a hand on the envelope again. He believed in me, not because I act, but because I listen. And now it's time to speak. Jonathan took a breath, steady but somber. One morning I found a note tucked under my car's windshield. Like the others, it read, "Stay silent or lose everything." He looked out across the studio. I began doubting everyone, staff, friends, even people I love. My wife saw the change in me. She asked what was wrong, but how do you explain something you don't understand? Something you're afraid might put her in danger? Hannity's voice sliced into the stillness, sharp. Did you ever consider just walking away, locking that envelope in a drawer and moving on? Jonathan turned toward him, unwavering. Every day. He paused, his voice thickening. I have a newborn son, a wife who trusts me, a career I never thought I'd have. Opening this envelope could ruin it all. But then I remember his voice, that night in Rome. He didn't choose me because I was brave. He chose me because he believed I'd find the strength when it mattered most. His tone grew firmer now. And then one morning, everything changed. The studio was breathless. I was feeding my son. The house was quiet. A package arrived, no address, just a plain brown envelope. Inside was a typed message. The time has come. Speak, or the truth dies with him. And with it, a small silver cross. He reached into his jacket pocket and revealed it, holding it between his fingers. It was just like the one my grandmother used to wear. The room fell into deeper silence. I knew then. I couldn't wait anymore. He paused, voice soft but unshakable. That night I walked the living room floor, the envelope in my hand, my baby sleeping down the hall. I thought about the risks, about my family, but I also thought about those who believed because someone dared to say what no one else would. He turned to Hannity and then to the audience. If what's inside this envelope can protect even one soul from what's coming, how can I keep it hidden? He gestured around the studio. I chose live television because I needed a place no one could cut, spin, or silence. I told my team I was coming for a discussion. They thought it was about faith in the media, but it's bigger than that. It always was. Hannity leaned in, quieter now. Are you afraid of the consequences? Not just for you, but for your family, your work. Jonathan nodded gently. Yes, I'm afraid. But fear isn't a reason to betray a promise. He sat up straighter, placing his hand on the envelope. I picture him, alone in that small room in Rome, entrusting me with something he couldn't carry anymore. If I stay silent now, I will carry a regret far heavier than this letter. He exhaled slowly. Before I came here, I did something I haven't done in a long time. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and knelt. He looked down, then raised his eyes toward the audience. I didn't pray for answers. I prayed for courage. He glanced at the silver cross in his hand. I saw my grandmother's face in my memory, heard her say, "Stand tall, Jonathan, even when it trembles under your feet." And I felt him, Pope Francis, somewhere near, urging me forward. The audience was still. Every eye was on him. I'm not here to be a hero, Jonathan said, his voice rich and unwavering. I'm here because a man who carried the world asked me to carry one small piece of it, and tonight I will keep that promise. Hannity nodded slowly, visibly moved. So, What's next, Jonathan? You're holding that envelope. Are you ready? Jonathan didn't answer at first. He reached forward and lifted the envelope, the red wax glinting under the lights like blood on parchment. This isn't just about what's inside, he said softly. It's about what happens when we stop running from the truth. He looked Hannity directly in the eyes. I don't know what I'll find, but I know I can't turn back. The light seemed to dim slightly, as if the world itself narrowed to the envelope between them. You've taken us on a powerful journey, Hannity said, almost in a whisper. But now, what are you going to do? Jonathan traced the wax seal with his thumb, his face filled with resolve, but beneath it, a flicker of trembling truth. I've carried this too long, he said clearly, no hesitation left. He gave it to me, believing I'd know when the time had come. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, weathered knife. Its wooden handle was carved with a tiny cross. A gift from my grandmother, he said quietly, for opening things when I was finally ready. Under the harsh glow of the studio, the blade gleamed faintly. He slid it beneath the seal. The wax broke with a soft crack, sharp, final, sacred. The studio didn't move. He opened the envelope and slowly removed a single thin page. Slanted handwriting covered it from top to bottom. His hands trembled just slightly as he began to go on. These are his words, Jonathan said, and his voice dropped into something near prayer. Jonathan, you are light in the storm. I write these lines with a heavy heart, for the church I love is being eaten from within. There are those who claim God's name but act for power. They don't destroy with swords, but with smiles and false promises. I have fought, but I cannot defeat them alone. The studio remained silent, only Jonathan's voice echoing. I see a shadow, not from the church, but cloaked as a friend. He will make faith vanish, not with war, but with emptiness. If I am gone, you must speak. Truth is the only flame left. Jonathan slowly lowered the paper. Hannity, eyes wide, whispered, Are you saying he foresaw someone? A threat? Jonathan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached back into the envelope and pulled out a smaller note, written in a shakier hand. There's more, he said. They call themselves Son Namian. Not enemies, not allies. They live into the shadows. They say they want to save the church, but I fear they will destroy it first. He looked up at the audience, his voice firmer now. Namian. The name rang like a bell with no echo. I don't know who they are, but after his death, I received this. Jonathan reached into his jacket once more, and from an inner pocket, he produced a small, unlabeled black USB stick. No message, no return address, just this. He nodded to the tech team. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life. A grainy video began to play, clearly shot in secret. Candlelight, stone walls, a chamber deep within the Vatican. 4 men in black robes sat around a table, whispering, The Dubai deal must stay buried. They know too much. Stop them before the cardinal finds out. Son Namian cannot be exposed. The video cut to black. Gasps filled the studio. Phones were raised. Hannity, visibly shaken, turned to Jonathan. This is a conspiracy inside the Vatican. Are you saying this is real? Jonathan looked him dead in the eye. I don't know, but I know what he trusted me to do. The audience gasped. A few raised their phones to record. Hannity, visibly shaken, turned toward Jonathan. This is a conspiracy within the Vatican? He asked. Are you sure the video is real? Jonathan didn't flinch. His voice was steady, honest. I'm not sure, he admitted, but it came with a message. The Namian lives. I had a friend in the FBI take a look. They confirmed the footage was unedited, but completely untraceable. Someone wanted me to see it, and now I want the world to see it. He turned toward the audience, his voice sharpening with purpose. Pope Francis wasn't just warning me about a single person. He was speaking about a system, one that uses the language of faith to manipulate hearts. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. He chose me because I stand outside the institution, because I could speak when he could not. Suddenly, Jonathan's phone vibrated violently on the table. A notification flashed across the screen. He glanced at it, and his expression faltered for just a second. Hannity caught it immediately. Jonathan, what is it? What just happened? Jonathan picked up the phone and read the message aloud, his voice tight but unbroken. You've gone too far. The Namian is watching. He held the screen up to the camera. The audience buzzed with whispers and anxious looks. They know I'm speaking, Jonathan said, his voice trembling ever so slightly. And I'm telling you now, I'm not going to stop. Hannity tried to ground the moment, his tone more urgent. You're putting yourself in danger. Is it really worth it? Jonathan turned to him, eyes blazing with clarity. If I stay silent, everything he fought for dies in the dark. I'm not just speaking for him. I'm speaking for everyone who still believes in good, even when the world tries to silence it. Outside the studio, social media was exploding. Twitter, Instagram, news outlets, all buzzing. Is he crazy or a prophet? What is the Vatican hiding? Some audience members clapped. Others just stared, overwhelmed. Jonathan placed the envelope and USB drive neatly on the table, then looked into the camera as if he were speaking to each soul watching. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice cutting through the air like steel. "Truth is a flame, and I won't let it die." For the first time in his broadcasting career, Hannity seemed at a loss. He looked at Jonathan, then to the audience. We need a moment to process." He turned back. "Jonathan, is there anything else you want to share?" Jonathan slowly shook his head, then paused. "I'm not finished yet," he said, his voice unwavering. "But to understand it all, you need to see this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, face-down photograph. The glossy paper glinted under the lights. The studio slipped back into thick, anxious silence. Suddenly, a sharp crashing sound rang out from backstage, like glass breaking. The audience jolted. Some stood. A few gasped. Security turned to attention. Jonathan stood firm, gripping the photograph, his posture calm but alert. The envelope and USB drive on the table seemed to hum with the energy of what was unfolding. Hannity turned toward him, clearly rattled. "Jonathan, we've just received a security alert. Something's happening backstage. And that photo, what are you going to show us?" Jonathan drew in a deep breath. His eyes scanned the room, then focused on Hannity. "I don't know who's out there," he said quietly, "but I know they don't want this story to continue, which is exactly why I have to show you." He lifted the photo slightly, still face down. The studio lights reflected off its surface like a warning. "This isn't just a photograph," he said. "It's proof. Proof that I wasn't alone the night I met him." Hannity blinked. "You mean this is connected to the Pope? To Son Namian?" Jonathan nodded. "I received this after he passed. No message, no return address, just this, delivered in an unmarked envelope." He turned it over and showed it first to Hannity. The host leaned in, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. In the blurry image, Jonathan and Pope Francis, walking through a shadowed corridor in Casa Santa Marta. But in the back, partially obscured behind a marble pillar, stood a hooded figure. A long, dark cloak, no face visible. The studio murmured, a wave of tension rippling through the crowd. Hannity leaned forward, his voice tight. "Who is that? A witness or a threat?" Jonathan placed the photo down carefully on the table, out of view of the camera. "I don't know," he said plainly, "but this isn't the only time." He reached into his coat again and produced a small envelope, withdrawing 2 more photographs. He laid them beside the first. One was taken in Rome, outside a chapel. Another, in D.C. And the last, just outside my house in New York. He pointed to the images. Same cloak, same silhouette, always distant, always watching. "I hired a private investigator. They found nothing, no fingerprints, no record of who took these. Whoever it is, they want me to know I'm being watched. But not by whom." Hannity shook his head slowly, torn between disbelief and awe. "You think this figure is with Son Namian?" Jonathan looked him in the eye. "I think they're tied together, maybe even deeper than we know." He held one photo up toward the audience. "In my dream, Pope Francis said, 'You will see the darkness before you see the light.' Maybe this figure is that darkness. Maybe it's part of Son Namian, or maybe it's fighting against them. But one thing I'm certain of, they were there that night, watching, recording. And if they were there," he looked toward the edge of the studio, his voice dropping, "they might be here now." A ripple of fear moved through the crowd. Some audience members glanced behind them. Security stepped toward the stage. Hannity leaned in, trying to stabilize the moment. "You're saying we could be in danger right now?" Jonathan gave a faint, bitter smile. "Truth has always been dangerous, Sean. That's why they try to bury it." He turned back to the audience, his voice rising like a quiet battle cry. "I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to ask yourself, if there's nothing to hide, why are they trying so hard to silence me? Why the letters, the photos, the threats? Why the fear?" Suddenly, another metallic bang echoed from backstage. Screams, a chair toppled, gasps filled the room. Hannity stood, signaling security, but Jonathan remained still. "They want to scare me," he said, "but I made him a promise, and I will keep it, no matter the kid." Hannity turned to him, voice urgent. "Jonathan, do you think we should stop the broadcast? For safety?" Jonathan shook his head, fire burning in his gaze. No, stopping is what they want. Stopping is letting them win, Jonathan said, his voice calm but resolute. I'm not just speaking for myself, and I'm not only speaking for him. I'm speaking for those who were silenced, for those who never got their chance to be heard. If I stop now, who's left to carry this forward? He picked up the first photograph, the one with the shadowed figure, and held it up for the cameras. The audience leaned in. Look, he said, his voice firm and echoing. This is why he chose me, because I'm not part of the church's structure. I'm not bound by their rules. I can show you what they've kept hidden, what he couldn't reveal himself. Social media exploded. Who's the figure in the photo? He's being hunted. Jonathan Roumie just turned the church inside out. Some in the audience applauded. Others remained motionless, caught in something far bigger than they'd anticipated. Jonathan lowered the photo gently, placing it next to the USB drive and envelope. His voice dropped into something fierce and clear. This shadow, this figure, is only one piece of the puzzle, but I won't stop until I find the rest, until the entire truth is uncovered. For the first time in the broadcast, Hannity looked visibly shaken, his professionalism wavering beneath awe and fear. Jonathan, you're opening a door that may not close again. Are you sure you're ready to walk through it? Jonathan didn't blink. I walked through that door the moment I opened the envelope, and I won't turn back now, not for anything. Then another sound, a loud, echoing bang backstage. A door had been forced open. Audience members gasped. Some cried out. Security scrambled. Jonathan stood frozen, but unshaken, the photo still in his hand, his face calm, his eyes locked on something unseen. On the table, the envelope, the USB drive, the photos, now evidence of the storm he had unleashed. Hannity looked around, trying to keep control. Jonathan, he said urgently, we've got a security breach. You've just revealed powerful things. The video, the cloaked figure, this group calling themselves Son Namian. What now? What do you expect happens next? Jonathan slowly set the photo down, his eyes sweeping the room. Reading not panic but burden. I don't expect peace, he said. I knew the moment I opened that seal, everything would change. He took a step closer to the edge of the stage. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to keep a promise. Hannity tried calming the crowd, but the air was wound tight with tension. You've got the world's attention, he said, but the people behind these threats, they won't let this go. Do you think they'll come after you? Jonathan gave a faint smile, quiet, bitter, almost compassionate. I don't know who they are, but I know they're afraid. If they weren't, they wouldn't be trying this hard to shut me down. The letters, the photos, the anonymous warnings, this chaos tonight. He pointed toward the backstage corridor. That's not random, it's desperation, and it only makes me more certain. What I carry is dangerous, because it's real. The audience began settling. Phones stayed raised. The tension didn't drop, it crystallized. Trending tags now flooded every platform. Jonathan Roumie challenge, the Namian shadow. In the photo, some called him brave, others called it reckless, conspiratorial, dangerous. But Jonathan remained unfazed. He turned to Hannity, who still seemed searching for balance. I don't expect everyone to believe me right away, Jonathan said, but I hope they'll at least start asking questions. He glanced into the camera, eyes hard with truth. If there's nothing to hide, then why silence me? Hannity, regaining some composure, tried to steer forward. You've done something irreversible. You've opened the envelope. You've shown the video. You've shared the photos. But what about the consequences? Your life, your family, your work. For the first time that night, Jonathan hesitated. Not in fear, just in honesty. I haven't told anyone, not even my agent, not my wife. They all think I came here to talk about a new season or a podcast. But after tonight, my phone won't stop. I might lose friends. I might lose everything. He turned again to the camera, his voice steady. But I'm not doing this for fame or attention or even for justice. I'm doing this because one man looked me in the eyes, handed me a sealed truth, and said, speak when I no longer can. He paused just a beat and added, if I don't speak now, who will? Suddenly, a staffer appeared behind the camera, whispering frantically into Hannity's earpiece. His eyes darkened. He turned sharply to Jonathan. There's a group outside the buildings, he said, tense, unidentified. Security's trying to hold them back. They're demanding to see you. It's getting dangerous. Hannity hesitated. Do you want to pause? Jonathan shook his head. No. He stood taller, eyes blazing. Pausing is what they want. So is fear. So is silence. And I won't give them any of it. He held up the photo again, now facing the audience fully. What I've shown you, the envelope, the USB, the video, the photo, isn't the whole story. It's just the surface, Berhard. He looked at the lens like he was talking to someone through IMDc. The Pope saw something greater than a political scandal. He saw a threat not just to the church, but to faith itself. And I will not let that be buried. The audience began to clap, but the applause was shaky, uneasy. A woman in the front row shouted, "He's telling the truth, let him speak." Another leaned to her neighbor. "This is insane, what is he trying to start?" Jonathan heard them but didn't react. He looked directly into the camera again. "I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to listen." He pointed to the sky, his voice rising. "The truth doesn't need me to survive, but I needed to speak it to live with myself." Hannity, still visibly moved, asked softly, "What's next, Jonathan? What will you do when you leave this room?" Jonathan breathed in. "I'll go home, hug my son, tell my wife that I did the right thing." Then his voice darkened. "But I know tonight won't be quiet." He picked up his phone and showed the screen. Another message had arrived. "Son Namian does not forgive. You chose the wrong side." He read it aloud. The audience stirred. "I know what they want," he said, his voice stronger now. "They want me scared." He placed the phone face down. "But I grew up in New York, where my grandmother taught me that faith isn't just believing when it's easy. It's standing tall when everything's falling apart." Suddenly, more noise backstage. Security shouting. Hannity rose, his voice raised. "Jonathan, we might have to cut the feed. Security says the situation is escalating. Fast." Jonathan stood too, photo in hand, calm. "Let them come." He looked around the room, fearless. "I've said what needed to be said. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of a fight we all need to face." The audience was divided. Some cheered, others shook their heads. Social media flooded with clips, him holding the cross, the photo, the messages, the moment of defiance. One trending post read, "Jonathan Roumie just declared war on the shadows." Another, "This isn't a testimony, it's a battle cry." Jonathan looked at Hannity one last time, his eyes steel. "I don't know what's waiting outside," he said, in voice steady as a blade. "But I know one thing, I kept my promise, and that's all that matters." Hannity didn't speak. He simply nodded, speechless. The lights dimmed, the noise outside swelled, and Jonathan Roumie stood, photo in hand, unshaken. The truth had been spoken, and nothing would ever be the same. Hannity looked at him, then turned to the audience, his voice hesitant. "We've just witnessed a historic moment. Jonathan Roumie, thank you, and be careful." Jonathan nodded once, slowly, his gaze locked on the camera as if sending a final message to the world. Truth is never easy, but it's always worth fighting for. The audience, having just watched Jonathan expose secrets tied to Pope Francis, the Vatican, and a shadowy figure behind the envelope, the video and the photos wavered between awe and fear. Some clapped, many remained frozen, transfixed. Jonathan stood tall, photo still in hand, like a knight holding his sword. Hannity's voice cracked slightly as he tried to close the show amid the tension. "Jonathan, with everything that's happening out there, what will you do next?" Jonathan turned to him. His heart pounded, but his voice was soft, sharp as a blade. "I'll keep going, not because I want to, but because I have to. The Pope saw something I didn't, a battle bigger than faith, bigger than politics, and I'm only just beginning to understand it." The studio lights dimmed. Security moved in. Jonathan stepped down from the stage. "Jonathan, don't give up," someone in the crowd shouted, but he didn't look back. He clutched the photo tighter, as if it were a compass, a promise, a shield. Outside the studio, police sirens howled through Washington, D.C., blending with the roar of an unidentified crowd. Social media exploded. "He just challenged an invisible force, brave or insane. Protect him at all costs." When Jonathan arrived home late that night, the apartment was still. Moonlight spilled through the curtains. He collapsed onto the couch, opened his phone, dozens of missed calls, voicemails, in unknown numbers. But one message stood out. No sender. "This Namian is not the enemy. Find us where the light begins." Jonathan stared. His heart began to race. The Pope's voice echoed from his dream. "You will see the darkness before the light." Was Namian an enemy? Or something else? At dawn, another knock. A package lay on his doorstep. No name, no mark. Inside, a wooden rosary. Its scent, pine and old incense, transported him back to the church in New York. where his grandmother once whispered prayers into his ear. A small note was folded beneath the rosary. Son Namian lives, go where the flame is lit. He gripped the rosary, feeling his grandmother beside him once more. Don't be afraid, my little one, her voice whispered across time. He stood before the mirror, no longer just an actor, no longer just a man from Queens. Now, a keeper of something far greater. His phone buzzed again. A White House advisor. Jonathan, the president wants to see you. What you said last night caused a storm. You need to explain. He didn't answer. He knew what that meeting meant. A chance to salvage his reputation, or a veiled threat to fall silent. Outside, a black car crept down his street, headlights cutting across his window like a warning. Someone was watching, like the figure in the photo. Still there, still silent. Jonathan sat down at the table, picked up a pen. He wrote a letter to his godson, just in case. I did this so you'd grow up in a world where truth still matters. Forgive me if I was wrong. He folded the letter, placed it in the safe next to the Vatican envelope and USB drive. He stood, looked at the sky. I made a promise, he whispered to the night, and I'll see it through. He put on his coat, gripped the rosary, stepped to the door. A cold wind rushed through the corridor. Down the street, a cloaked figure stood beneath the lamplight. Friend or foe, he didn't know, but he didn't turn back. Epilogue in narration. Social media remained ablaze. Who is Son Namian? Are they reformers or terrorists? Is Jonathan Roumie the only one who knows the truth? An anonymous post read, Jonathan Roumie just opened Pandora's box. Pray for him. In the darkness he walked, rosary in hand, faith in his chest, fear in his shadow. He didn't know if the road led to Rome, a hidden chapel, or a confrontation with the very force behind it all. But every step forward was a statement. The truth will endure. Even if he fell, it would rise again. And somewhere ahead, the cloaked figure waited, beckoning, challenging. Jonathan Roumie, carrying both faith and fear, walked into a journey no one could predict. Final note for the video. Jonathan Roumie's story, exposing secrets, facing threats, and stepping into the unknown, echoes the heart of what many Americans quietly face. Standing up for truth, knowing it might cost everything. This is about more than faith or conspiracy. It's about courage, legacy, and the cost of silence. Subscribe to the channel to follow Jonathan's next steps as the mystery behind Son Namian deepens. New revelations are coming. Don't miss them.